Just to start off with, well, I'm Carmen DeGiovane, and we're going to be talking about Community Navigation Project Community Navigation Mobility for Individuals with Disabilities. This is a project that we've been working on. It's a collaboration between the City of Columbus, Ohio State University, and AbleLink Technologies. First thing is, if you're interested in the proceedings that are going to come out after the conference, there's 5 authors, myself, Julie Fayetta, Sandra Metzler, Olivia Vega, and Andy Wolpert. Olivia and Andy are up here with me. But just so you know, Sandra Metzler is a mechanical engineer, so we have mechanical engineering background that's helping us, and Julie Fayetta is a OT who is working on her PhD. So just so you know who we are today and why we're up here, and to give you a little bit more information, I'm an associate professor, clinical associate professor at Ohio State University. I have a joint appointment working in the Assistive Technology Center and working in the occupational therapy division at Ohio State. And one of the cool things that I get to do there is to work on pilot projects that we're looking at developing new technologies or technologies that are ready to go into an implementation phase and figuring out how do we do that. And this is one of those opportunities to look at mobility assistance and look at navigation for people specifically with cognitive disabilities, looking at the implementation sciences side of it. So Olivia, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Olivia Vega. I'm an occupational therapy student at Ohio State, and I've been working since the start of the project kind of on this, and it's become my research specialization. So I'll talk a little bit more later about my involvement and everything.
And Andy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Andy Wolpert with the City of Columbus. I'm the Deputy Program Manager for the Smart Columbus program.
So it shouldn't be surprising to you that myself or Olivia are up here. I think it's really cool that Andy is up here just because he's bringing that unique perspective. And as we start talking about this project, we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of having this relationship between a university and a city. And sometimes we're talking different languages and how we've had to work together to figure all of that out. So our outline today is Andy will start off and he'll talk about Smart Columbus. So we'll start big and what does that really mean? I'll talk a little bit about Smart at Ohio State and then introduce the Mobility Assistance for People with Cognitive Disabilities project. Then Olivia will go in deep, and what we're hoping is by Olivia going in deep and really explaining what we've gone through over the past 3 years is that you'll have a sense of how you can take some of this information and apply it in your own settings and in your own communities. We'll then wrap things up by talking about the Wayfinder ecosystem. The Wayfinder app is the app that we're using in this project, so I'm giving you a little bit of a spoiler, but I think that'll help help you with the discussion as we get to that point, and then we just end up with next steps. The teacher in me always thinks that we really have to start with objectives. So we hope that you take away today 3 key features of a mobility navigation app for individuals with disabilities. Specifically, individuals with cognitive disabilities is what we're focused on. We're going to discuss 3 strategies for implementing a navigation app for individuals with cognitive disabilities, and that's where Olivia will really get into what are those key skills that you need in terms of training that a person needs in order to be able to use the app, and you also need in terms of training somebody. And then at the end, we hope that you're able to apply components of the Smart Columbus Mobility Assistant projects in your own community. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Andy, and he'll talk about the Smart Columbus project.
Thank you. All right, full disclosure, I am a transportation engineer. My background is in highway, freeway, design, construction, and safety. So after seeing some of these presentations today, I know that I'm the least intelligent person at this conference, and I am fine with that. There's so many great things happening here. It's just exciting to be here. When Carmen asked me to help present this, I thought it was a great opportunity to show how the public sector, the private sector, and institutional researchers are working together to really make an impact in people's lives. What I was not expecting is when I checked in today, at the front desk, the gentleman and woman who I was checking in with, when I gave them my name, they said, "Oh, you're speaking with Carmen today." And I said, oh yeah, I am. And it's like, is Carmen kind of a big deal? And he goes, yeah, he's a big deal around here. So I didn't know I was with a celebrity. So he's giving autographs after the session, I believe. I don't know if you're charging today, but it's a privilege to be able to work with Carmen. So let me give a little bit of a background on the Smart Columbus program. About 3 years ago, the City of Columbus was awarded $40 million by the United States Department of Transportation. This was part of the Smart City Challenge. Technology is changing our lives on a daily basis. I've seen that today with how assistive technology is really impacting lives. It's also true in the transportation industry. And so the US DOT took this as an opportunity to challenge cities to see how technology can make our cities better, more efficient from a transportation, more improve safety from a transportation perspective, and overall improve the lives of our residents and visitors. So a quick overview of Smart Columbus. The Smart Columbus program, obviously in the city of Columbus is a growing city, much like many cities here in the United States. We're #1 in the Midwest as far as growth in population, jobs, and GDP. Columbus is home to many Fortune 500 companies. We have L Brands, Nationwide Insurance, Honda, Wendy's. These are a few of those companies that are based out of Columbus. And with the Smart City Challenge, we developed many objectives and outcomes as part of this program. Our vision, as it states, is to empower our residents to live their best lives through responsive, innovative, and safe mobility solutions. And we want to use technology to help with that equitable access to transportation, really make a positive impact in people's lives, and particularly gaining that mobility independence, as we'll see in this project. These outcomes, we worked with the United States DOT to develop these outcomes. These align with the goals that the US DOT had identified as part of the Smart City Challenge. These are goals or outcomes that every city really strives to achieve on a daily basis. And so this program is no different than what any other city is trying to achieve. This is a timeline of where we've been and where we are and what our future holds. So back in August of 2016 is when the City of Columbus was awarded the $40 million from the US DOT. Also, we received $10 million from the Paul G. Allen Foundation. That $10 million is focused on electrification and decarbonation initiatives within the City of Columbus. So altogether, back in August, we were awarded $50 million. We also had private and cost sharing from other agencies as part of this too. It really served as seed money to grow the Smart Columbus program. So once we were awarded the program, it took a little bit of time to get up to speed. I think maybe the city bit off a little bit more than we could chew, maybe you could say. We had lofty goals. So we started to talk to stakeholders, talking with the US DOT, really shaping the project. Initially we had stated that we'd have 15 projects. After some of that stakeholder engagement, we realized, okay, some of these projects are already linked to other projects we're doing at the city. Some of these projects may not truly meet the US DOT's goals. So we really streamlined things, and we have 9 total projects. We began the system engineering process. Systems engineering is a very regimented step-by-step process that you go through. You develop a concept of operations by getting needs from your stakeholders, and you develop your system requirements, and then you develop interface control documents, knowing how everything reacts with each other, interacts with each other. It's a very step-by-step process. So we began that back in 2016, 2017. Started collecting data. Data is a huge part of this program. And then we've eventually gotten to the point now where we are ready to deploy projects. So this project we'll be talking about today is actually the first project we'll deploy at the end of April. We have about 4 or 5 other projects we'll be deploying this year and a couple more early in 2020. But that's where we go, or that's where we're going as this program moves forward. We'll be collecting data for a year after each project because we had to evaluate each project. We had performance measures we've identified. We want to report back to the USTUT and other cities about the success of these projects so they can learn from our experiences and what maybe we did well, what maybe were some challenges and what are some opportunities moving forward, because we do want all these projects to move forward and be sustainable in the long run. So I want to talk about the project or program in general. Really, there's three main components, and then at the top you'll see the operating system. I'll start with the operating system. This is being built, and this is going to support all of our projects, but also support government agencies, public, private, research institutes moving forward. This is going to be essentially a database. It'll ingest, disseminate data. It will also be integrated into some of our projects. It'll be key. We're really building something that is unique to Columbus, but it's also going to be portable, scalable, and compatible to other cities. So we're building this, but one of the goals is to make sure that other cities can use this too. The AbleLink Technologies, what we're doing there is we're using existing technologies to better transportation and mobility in the city. So that's connected vehicles. This technology is on somewhat the cutting edge, but it's been in study for the last 5 to 10 years in more detail. There's a couple pilots going on right now, but it's essentially where you install devices in your vehicle, devices along the roadside where you can communicate. So you know what the vehicles ahead of you are doing. The infrastructure communicates with you so you know what signal phase and timing are at a signalized intersection, for example. These are all things that connected vehicles can do. Enhanced human services, this is using technology to improve the lives of our residents and visitors by providing them better access to jobs, goods, services, entertainment. The multimodal trip planning and common payment system project, what we're building there is an application that combines all modes of transportation that are provided in the city of Columbus. So you can plan a trip, a multimodal trip, and then pay for that trip in one spot. So you don't have to go to different applications to be able to pay for a trip. As the city of Columbus grows, we cannot build any more roads, lanes. The capacity is what it is. Funding perspective-wise, transportation funding is decreasing, so we really need to encourage people to use other modes of transportation other than just single occupancy vehicles. We hope this project encourages that and enables them to have that seamless transportation experience. Smart mobility hubs is where we're bringing those modes of transportation together physically at one spot so people can have access to different modes. Mobility assistance project, as we'll hear about shortly here, is focused on primarily allowing that mobility independence for those who need it most. The prenatal trip assistance project, this project is focused on helping expectant mothers access the medical care that they need. The non-emergency medical transportation system in the city of Columbus is lacking. And so we're looking to improve that with the help of the managed care organizations, the Ohio Department of Medicaid, and the Ohio State University. And then event parking management, this is a project that is focused on improving the availability of parking information to our residents and visitors, knowing where you can go to get parking, knowing the probability of having parking available along the street at meters, and then being able to pay for that parking through that common payment system. And lastly, I'll talk about the emerging technologies. This is really the cutting or maybe even bleeding edge of technologies. And this project is focused on our connected electric autonomous vehicles, so self-driving vehicles. This technology is ever emerging. I know a few years ago, I think everybody thought, well, we'll be having self-driving vehicles in the next 5 years. Well, I think recently, if you read some articles, I think that technology is further down the road than what we thought a few years ago. So it might be 10 or 15 years, but there's advances being made every day, and it's an exciting time for the transportation industry. Wanted to point out the self-driving or autonomous vehicle project a little bit. In talking with our stakeholders throughout the city, this is a project that can really impact those that have mobility challenges. A couple stories that I've heard from talking to stakeholders. One, elderly adults. They've had mom and dad might have the conversation with their mom and dad saying, well, it's time to take the keys away. And elderly adults don't want to lose that mobility independence. And so self-driving vehicles is a way that they can maintain that mobility independence. And then a friend of ours at the Ohio Department of Transportation, he has a son who has cerebral palsy. Probably won't be able to drive, obviously. But with the advancement of technologies like this, he should be able to do that in the future. And so that's something that he's really excited about. So this can really benefit a lot of people as we move forward. The project that we're really focused on in Columbus is connecting those areas that need transportation the most to goods and services and public transportation. And this is a snapshot of the type of vehicle we'll be using as part of this project. It'll have 10 to 15 passenger capacity. We'll have a wheelchair accessible ramp. We will have an operator on board too to assist passengers as part of the project. So it's exciting times in Columbus, and we're really happy to be teaching, I guess, other cities how technology can really be of a benefit. And we look forward to reporting out in a couple years about the benefits this project has. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Carmen.
So one of the goals of Smart Columbus in general was to take the initial $40 million and really amplify that, try to identify ways that the whole community can amplify what is going on with those simple projects. And one of the obvious ways was to include Ohio State. Like Andy talked about before, sometimes it takes a little while to get that inertia going. And at Ohio State, it took a little while to get that inertia going. But finally, over the past year, basically 12 months, we've really been able to elevate and really accelerate what we've been doing at Ohio State. So the first thing, I guess this kind of harkens to stereotypes of academics. We first had to define what is smart. And it's like, do we really have to define what is smart? But for the purposes of this project, it's leveraging connected technology and data to better the quality of life. And the cool thing for me was, as I was sitting in some of these meetings and some of these discussions, was a light bulb went off in my head and said, this is an opportunity for me to advocate for all the people that I work with on a daily basis through the Assistive Technology Center. And so really we've seen the discussions today, and we've seen the workshops on connected technology and how do we use that. And we've talked about data and the importance of data. Now we've got these, what they started calling, it's a new term for me, data lakes and data ponds, and how can we use the data that's there. With the important part being that we're using this technology to improve the quality of life, and I always put at the end of it, of individuals with disabilities. I just want to highlight a couple projects that Andy had up earlier. These are the projects that Ohio State is directly involved with. The first one is the operating system. The second one is the multimodal trip planning app. The third one is the program that we're working on. The fourth one is the prenatal trip assistance. And the last one is the connected electric autonomous vehicles. I just want to come back to the prenatal trip assistance project for a second. And that's because the lead PI, the lead investigator, is Courtney Lynch. And Courtney Lynch and I have been working together on just to make sure we're coordinating what's going on with each of our projects. And we found out that there's a lot of similarities. So what Courtney is working on is how do we decrease infant mortality by providing the transportation that expecting mothers or mothers who have had children in the past year need in order to get to their medical appointments. And a lot of the issues that she has in getting, or that people are having in getting those medical appointments, are the same issues that we see for people with disabilities trying to get to the medical appointments at the Assistive Technology Center. So though we're not directly involved in this project, this is one project that I really see could help us and help other communities in the future. The ambition of SMART at Ohio State is to transform the university into a living laboratory for connected technologies that create more livable, sustainable, and socially just communities across Ohio. The thing that just jumps out at me is the opportunity to have a living laboratory. Whereas Andy and the city of Columbus have to work in this large area, a relatively large area, and meet the needs of a very large community, Ohio State has this opportunity to control a little bit more of what's going on and to provide services in a unique and different way that can amplify what's going on a little bit more. And the goals of the project are to move people and goods more safely and efficiently, improve the mental health and physical health of our communities, reduce resource consumption, neutralize carbon emissions, and minimize waste. And I think most importantly, based on the discussion that we had this morning, prepare students to be knowledgeable consumers and innovators in a smart world. And this last goal really harkens back to the discussion we had this morning about where's the next generation of ATPs, where's the next generation of clinicians, where's the next generation of engineers that are interested in this field going to come for. And it's going to be looking at these larger projects, these larger goals, and figuring out how do we infuse their educational goals with these ideas around working with people with disabilities and focusing on developing that next set of technology that, that serves or that can provide benefit to a larger group of people. So now we've started off with Smart Columbus, came down to Smart at Ohio State, and we're going to finish off now with the project, the Mobility Assistance for People with Cognitive Disabilities. Originally, the project, there were 3 primary goals that we pulled out of it. The first goal is to create an opportunity so that individuals naturally choose to use the fixed route bus system as an alternative to paratransit. And one of the things that we've seen through the years is that creating opportunities for novel transportation for people with disabilities that use paratransit is very difficult due to the time lags that it takes in order for them to get a hold of the whatever paratransit system they're in, get a hold of that system and to set up a time for that transportation to occur. The second thing is increase independence of travelers with disabilities when using the fixed route service. And the third thing, which is one of the initiatives of the CODA, which is the Central Ohio Transit Authority, is to reduce by increasing the number of people who are using the fixed route trips, they then have a larger pool of money to pull forward and to apply to other activities. So once we found out about this project, we quickly learned as partners in it that one of the things that the city wanted to focus on were apps. So when we went in, we were talking about, oh, this is about transportation. There's a lot of things we can address. And we quickly found out, but the thing that they wanted to focus on was app development and looking at how apps can help people in terms of using the fixed bus route system. So we went out and we looked and said, all right, so for people with cognitive disabilities, what are the things that we need to look at? And thankfully for us, there's a lot of literature out there. Most recently, Lindsay and Lamptey did a nice job of doing a systematic review to pull it all together, so I'm going to reference that article often today. And they talk about 3 areas that transportation is an essential element of mobility. It's better access to friends and community, and improved self-determination and quality of life. And so then we also looked at, and this is where the collaboration between the engineer and the occupational therapy side of things came in, started looking at community-based navigational skills. And those skills are comprehension, memory, attention, time management, literacy, multitasking, and problem solving. And I hope that you hear later on when Olivia is talking how we infuse many of these skills into the app that was created and also into the training process that goes along with it. We also found that, we also looked at pedestrian navigation and public transit and found out that there's some key skills associated with that. And that's, the obvious one is the pedestrian and general navigation skills. And then there's safety, landmark recognition, route learning, and public transportation skills. So we had figured out what the skills were. Now we wanted to look at what are we going to look for in terms of an app. And so we had to have an understanding of how apps can improve navigation and can improve wayfinding. And so the 2 things that Lindsay and Lamptey identify are navigation and wayfinding. So we were glad to see that. The other things that they talk about are route learning, pedestrian travel, and public transit. Which leads to the app. So we oftentimes think of apps as being something that can solve a lot of problems. But oftentimes, by solving a problem, they create new problems. So we wanted to be very careful and methodical on how we picked an app and how we worked with the developer to further develop the existing app. And so some of the features that Livingston Lee et al. In 2014 identified were voice instructions, walking routes as well as bus routes, so looking at the whole trip, not just the middle part of the trip, initial prompts to start the trip, programming of landmark notifications of not your stop, so that when a bus slows down, a person knows they shouldn't get off at this stop, this isn't the place that they need to get off, notification of when to get off the bus, customized reminders, a trip planner, caregiver programming, which is an important part because for individuals with cognitive disability, oftentimes there's a caregiver or a travel partner that's integrally involved in their transportation needs, caregiver notification, and real-time tracking of buses. So in talking about all those skills and all those apps, I'm going to now turn it over to Olivia, and she's going to explain how we pulled this all together.
So hi, again, my name's Olivia Viga. I'm an occupational therapy student. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different phases and how it's progressed and then kind of where we're at now. So I kind of really got involved when Ohio State collaborated with Smart Columbus. And one of the programs that really kind of started that collaboration was the PEACE program, which stands for Pre-Vocational Integrated Education and Campus Experience. So essentially this program is a 6-week internship program for adults with cognitive disabilities, and it sets them up with internships throughout the Columbus area or on Ohio State's campus. And then they're assigned with a job coach at that internship to help support them throughout their internship and help them build the job skills necessary for them to be successful. And then the goal is to eventually fade out the job coach so that the individual can be independent at this job site. So I actually initially started to get involved with this whole entire project and Smart Columbus in general just through sitting in on the first focus group with PEACE. So I got to listen in and kind of hear what were some of the barriers that they were experiencing that were preventing these individuals from becoming independent at their job sites. And one thing that continuously was mentioned was transportation, and that this was really limiting those individuals from getting to their sites on time. It made them look less professional. They weren't getting dropped off at the right locations, and some of the ways that they were getting there were unsafe and it wasn't the right vehicle to take them. So this really kind of made me angry, and I really wanted to kind of figure out what's an option to really help these individuals, because everybody should have the opportunity to be able to get to a job if they really want to work. So after that focus group about a year later, once I started to learn more about the Smart Columbus project, we kind of started the very first phase of implementation science, if you will, where we got to partner with the PEACE program, which is run through the OSU Nysonger Center. And this is one of the first federally funded university centers for experience and excellence in developmental disabilities. So they're gracious enough to let us work with some of the individuals part of the PEACE program 1 to 2 times per week. And we really just wanted to kind of know what apps are out there currently available for transportation, and how are they working with individuals with cognitive disabilities. So we worked with 4 interns and really just wanted to get their preference on which apps they liked the most. The job coaches kind of played the role as the caregiver and what that would mean to the caregiver for having to support an individual with an app versus in-person support. And then their overall satisfaction with using the public transportation system and what barriers were they running into there. So those 3 apps that we were testing was the Wayfinder app, which is on the far right for you guys, and then the CODA Transit app, which is in the center, and that can be used for anybody who wants to use CODA, and then App in Town, which is another app that was originally designed for individuals with visual impairments, and then kind of transitioned into also individuals with cognitive disabilities, and it was kind of unanimous in the decision of what the interns preferred, and that was actually the Wayfinder app. So we ended up reporting that information to the City of Columbus, and they ran some of their metrics to figure out what would be best to select to move forward with, and that ended up being the Wayfinder app. So fast forward 1 year to summer 2018 of Peace. We partnered with them again, but this time we really wanted to know, okay, what works with the Wayfinder app, what doesn't work, can we give to the developer who we got to work really closely with, and kind of inform him on what things maybe the app needed to have to be more supportive to these individuals. And again, the caregiver satisfaction. And then also I was really interested in just kind of observing and seeing what were some of the barriers, not only with just using public transportation, but also with using an app and a smartphone, which might be a new skill for a lot of these individuals. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail just about that specific phase. We had a total of 8 participants during this time that I worked with, specifically just on the Wayfinder app. 2 of the participants had used a smartphone before, so that was a large majority that really hadn't even used or interacted with a smartphone prior. 1 participant had used Coda Mainstream pretty regularly, but not using the Coda fixed route system at all. 2 of the participants had used Coda fixed routes, but this was usually during a day program where they were going with a staff member and to just get out into the community, not for something necessarily they were planning the trip for or wanting to go on. And then the majority of participants used staff, other non-emergency medical transportation, or family to get around in the community. So for the very first part of this phase of the study, we really focused on smartphone training because this, again, was a new skill for a lot of these individuals. And then following that training and with using just the Wayfinder app, we then had the interns and job coaches assigned to different routes on Ohio State's campus using the CABS bus system, which is Ohio State's bus system, and then 1 Coda route in addition to that, using the Wayfinder app and kind of going through the community with their job coach. And then I was also there with them to kind of take observations and just see how things were going. At the end of each route that we did, I had them fill out a satisfaction survey, just kind of going over what did they like about the app, what wasn't working, and then I was also kind of keeping track on what things they were needing cues for, and things like that. And then finally, I trained the job coaches on how to use the other portions of the app, which is creating the routes and getting their feedback on that, if that would be something that, if they were a caregiver, would they be willing to do something like that, in addition to all the other responsibilities that they have to do. So at the very end, we had a focus group. So some of the things that we found that worked through this was that the app did increase overall feeling of access to the community and more integration, which is something that I was really excited about and wanted to kind of see if we could get that through this. The app did work with their personal skill sets. I'll go through kind of what the app looks like a little bit later, but it's really, you can customize it to the individual, and there's a lot of options on there that can really be customized to what the individual needs of the person using it is. You could be going to the same place as somebody else and taking the same route, but your route on your phone might look completely different than the person next to you, depending on what you would particularly need. It did increase their overall confidence. Everybody said that they did feel more confident in using something like public transportation, even though this was something that was really new to them and they didn't typically want to use or have the option to use that prior. And then it did increase their overall skills just regarding technology, mobility, and safety. These were things that they maybe necessarily didn't have to think about independently as much when they had a staff member who was kind of directing them and kind of helping them through those situations. So they really were understanding and learning those skills through this process. So some challenges and room for opportunity. A lot of the individuals said that they would have liked more hands-on time really practicing their routes. Since Peace was only a 6-week program, they didn't really have a ton of time to actually practice and use the app as much as they would have liked. And then one-on-one training time was really beneficial for them, so 1 trainer to 1 individual seemed to work the best. But they did actually enjoy working in smaller groups so that they could learn from their peers, but still having that one-on-one trainer with them through that was beneficial. We also found that a training protocol that was more standardized might be more beneficial to help them with their success with using the app and just going out into the community, especially if this is a newer skill to a lot of those individuals. And then there's a big emphasis on smartphone training. Again, this was a newer skill for a lot of these individuals, so we really needed to focus on that and maybe put more effort into that so they would feel more comfortable. One thing that we did find is participants would rather keep doing what they're doing than trying something new. And even though they did report feeling more confidence, I think it was still more of that they wanted to go back to something that was safe and familiar unless they had more experience and repetition with it. And then also just further research on what the specific skills will look like in real time. I know we talked a little bit about those skills that Carmen was mentioning in those articles, but what does that really look like when you actually go out, and what are the specific tricks and tips that you really need to know to be successful and safe out in the community? So this kind of leads into our current phase that we're in right now, which is the training development, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that actually training protocol is starting to look like. So we partnered with Arc North Industries for these last couple months. Arc North is a day program in Columbus that, again, supports those individuals in learning new job skills, and they have jobs on site and try to pair them up with other jobs throughout the community. And several of these participants were actually part of PEACE, which is how we kind of got involved with them. And they really liked this aspect of going more out into the community as they're starting to move towards a community-based model. So through that, I kind of started, and all of the experience previously, along with all the research that we found, started to just develop this training protocol, talking with other professionals that we also worked with, all the feedback, and tried to just put everything that I had learned in the last couple of years together to really come up with this more standard protocol for this technology. So we broke up those trainings into 4 different areas. This kind of goes back to the literature as well, what they were talking about that is necessary to be successful when using public transportation. So the first one is safety training. So that covers more of just that day-to-day safety when crossing streets, interacting socially with others in the community, how to be safe on the bus and things like that. The second training covers more of the smartphone use, so we had a whole day kind of specifically just to, okay, how do I make a phone call and call somebody in case of an emergency? How do I unlock a phone? And for some of the individuals, it was even just tapping appropriately on the screen to make sure that they're hitting the right buttons. The third was the Wayfinder app, so that was just learning about this new type of technology and how it works. And then the last one was my favorite one that we got to do. So this was the CODA bus training. CODA's mainstream office has an actual mock bus inside the building that they have crosswalks and everything like that in a controlled setting. So we kind of got to take the skills that everybody learned in the previous trainings and apply them in a more real life setting that was also controlled and felt a little bit more safe before actually going out into the community. And they really got to practice and ask questions while using the app as well. So I think a big thing that we found through each of the different phases is that everybody has varying levels of cognitive abilities, and we really want to make sure that we can address all of those and really hone in on everybody's individual learning styles. So I wanted to make sure that that was could be found throughout the training protocol. So we divided up into 2 different level groups. The first level group was to train more in a way that was through behavioral strategies. Similar information between the 2 groups was presented, but it was just more how it was presented that we had to kind of change. So some of those behavioral strategies included training, repetition, using consistent cues throughout. And then the second level group was using more problem solving strategies for these individuals so that they could kind of work through problems and have the correct strategies to help them during those times where they maybe don't have another person to ask for help. So we're still in progress, but very close to the end. So based on current observations, this is kind of what we found, that the training levels and strategies did benefit the varying learning styles, and that you could kind of customize them and use more of one strategy more than the other depending on what the individual needed. Repetition and practice was very apparent throughout every single phase. The more that we used it, the more comfortable and confident they felt, and then more carryover came through when using the app in real time. Smaller groups and more one-on-one attention was really important for a lot of these individuals. And then the training categories did appropriately meet the demands of being in the environment and using the bus system. And it was really cool to collaborate with all the different professions that were involved with this, to an OT, to the job coaches that were at Arc North, to people working at OSU Nysonger Center, and just really making sure that we really could get everything that we could into this training protocol. And then some of the individuals may still need supervision while en route, but that doesn't take away from the independence that's still gained through using this app. So even though they might not be able to go out into the community all by themselves, they're still gaining that more confidence and actually being able to take control when we're out on a route. For example, when we're going on routes right now, we'll be walking through and they're the one telling me to turn right at the end of the street, or they're now pressing the button to cross the street instead of waiting for their staff member to press that for them. So they're still gaining those skills and that independence, which is exciting to see. So now I'm going to show you guys kind of what this app looks like and some of the other portions that go along with this app. So back to that Wayfinder ecosystem. So Wayfinder, as they like to define it, is an accessible smartphone program for providing multimedia prompts to individuals with cognitive disabilities for navigating public transit systems. So Wayfinder was developed by AbleLink Technologies, and they create a lot of other different apps for individuals with disabilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about Wayfinder. So as you can see, these different screens on the phone kind of show what you would see if you're actually going on a route. The one on the far right is the initial screen that shows up when you open up the app, and these are all the different routes that you have programmed into the phone. Something that's really nice about Wayfinder is you actually get to take the pictures that are going to be put onto the phone and be shown to the individual. So if there's something that they are really attached to, like let's say they really love Wendy's or something like that, you can put a picture of Wendy's if you know that there's a Wendy's on that corner for them to be able to identify where it is that they need to turn. And then you can put the text into whatever you want it to say. So you can customize that to the wording that's best for them. If they prefer to use left or right or north, south, east, and west, you can kind of dictate what that says. And then also your voice recording goes into it. So you record what's being said in the app. And then as compared to Google Maps, where you put the start and end point of a route, you actually just take the route and create the GPS locations that come up along the way. So let's say that you're taking a route and you're trying to fill in the waypoints and you notice that a certain sidewalk isn't accessible to somebody in a wheelchair. You can then reroute that to however you want to be most accessible to that person. So a couple different ways that you can make the routes, what I was kind of just talking about, is on the actual app and phone itself, you can manually go and take the route and map the GPS locations as you're going along that route. You can also put in all those recordings that I was talking about as you're going through, or you can go back and edit those later. There's also a web portal function, which I've been using a lot through the ARC routes that I've been taking, just because I can't actually go and physically take those routes before I meet with them. So this is a nice option. It uses Google Maps to be able to pinpoint those locations. And it's different than Google Maps because it doesn't automatically set the route. You're still creating those waypoints. And there's still all the same features of adding the voiceovers and things like that. And then the pictures, you can actually take Google Maps images to put into them. And this is Pittsburgh, by the way. And then another good feature is that there's notifications and real-time tracking for the caregivers to use. So as the individual's on the route, you can actually see where they're going, and it'll notify you if the individual is going off route based on the certain amount of feet that you put in to be considered off route. We also get some other additional data through this portal, as you can kind of see up there, that we could collect to see how well the app is working. The individual also has the option to notify a caregiver if they're feeling like they're off route or that they're unsafe or that something's wrong, and it'll send an email notification for the caregiver, and then the caregiver can then call them if there's any problems. So there's also a couple different libraries that can be used. There's a private and a public library. So the private library would have all of your routes that you've created stored in there, and nobody else can have access to that. So this is an example from the PEACE program of all the routes that we took during that time. So there's also the public route, and that actually has all of CODA's fixed route bus systems programmed into that. So let's say you're wanting to go on a route and you don't want to actually manually put in all of the GPS locations for where that bus is going. You can actually download it from the public library and then delete the waypoints that that don't necessarily pertain to you, and then continue to make new ones for the walking route following that. And nobody else would be able to see the changes that you make. It would go back to your private account just for safety purposes. So like I said, you can download all of those routes and then upload them back into the cloud. So if you wanted to download them on different phones or things like that, that could also work. And actually going back to the last slide, a new function that's just been put in by the app developer is that you can actually track the bus in real time as well. So the individual can be on their phone and know how long it's going to be until the bus is going to be arriving so that they can prepare for that. All right.
So a couple things before we go to next steps that Olivia was talking about that I think was really interesting in this whole process was when we started this process, we saw $40 million. And we're like, oh, cool. You know, this whole city, it's going to revamp the city. And I see Andy kind of chuckling over there because we really did think that it was going to change the whole city. And we realized that this let's put it this way, I didn't realize how big of an issue transportation is and how we could only chunk off little pieces. The thing that I learned is that the importance of working with the developer of the app from the beginning and working through the process, getting city input the whole time so we better understood what they were looking for, us able to give them input, bringing in other stakeholders to get input, to get to the point where Olivia is describing this app that started out, when we first started this project, it was just an app and that's all there was. To now where there's an app and a portal where we can have access to what's called GTFS data. And I only say that just to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't know what it means, except for the fact that that's how we know where the buses are in real time. And it's pulling all those pieces together and infusing them all together that has got us to the point where we are. And so in terms of next steps, we're going live on April 29th. That's scary for me. And I'll be honest, as a researcher at OSU, oftentimes we have these deadlines, and these deadlines are, a little nebulous. If we're not able to quite get there, but we have good reasons to move it back and forth, we can. In this environment, these deadlines are deadlines. And so it's been really interesting to work in this different world more as a consultant than as a researcher. So on April 29th, we're going to go live. By that point, we'll have started training people. We won't have 30 people yet, but we'll have started training people. We're going to deal with the logistics of giving out phones. So we're giving out phones with the app that is on the phone and giving it to people to use out in the community. And we're going to see how that works, and we've got a whole year to do it. The fun part is we had IRB approval to work with ARC North from back in 2018. Today we just found out that we got IRB approval to work with the whole city. So that's really a cool milestone for us moving forward. So I think, yes, we have some time for questions from anybody that wants to ask a question, and here's our contact information. Is there anything you guys want to add before we jump to questions? No? Okay. Five?
No, does someone has some questions? I'm a volunteer. Yeah.
We don't know when it's coming to Dayton.
Oh, come on. No, so I assume that everybody can use this no matter whether you have developmental disabilities or not. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, anybody can use the app. In our personal use, so I use the transit app for public transportation within the city of Columbus. I found that it provides more information that I need that actually interferes with the type of transportation that I want to do. So I think it goes back to the conversation we had earlier today, is it could be one thing and another. And so anybody can use this app. And the thing that we forgot to mention earlier is the app is currently available on both the Android store, I guess that's what they call it, and the iOS App Store, the Apple App Store. It's $395, so it's not cheap, but it is currently available. The thing that is not available is access to the web portal. The web portal is specifically part of this project at this time and will go live in the future.
As part of this, through our stakeholder outreach, we really found that many people could benefit from this, just not cognitive disabilities. And so, in partnering with Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission and then Ohio State too, we'll be including older adults as part of the study. So we're looking for 5 to 6 older adults to participate because there's been identified as a great need to help older adults navigate the fixed route bus system also.
If nobody has any questions, I'm going to ask the question that always gets asked by when we do stakeholder events, just because I like to put Andy on the spot a little bit since he put me on the spot at the beginning of the presentation. So what's the sustainability of this project after we're done in 2020?
So sustainability-wise, that's of vital importance for all of our Smart Columbus projects. For this project specifically, the City of Columbus, we are not experts in this area. And that's why we've relied upon Ohio State and their expertise and the Central Ohio Transit Authority and other stakeholders. Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities has been key throughout this process also. So after this project, when we collect all this data, lots of survey information from all these participants to find out how well it served them, as long as data that we'll be collecting just actual transportation data. And we'll be using this and disseminate those results. And the hope is that we have a champion really step up and take ownership of this project. And right now, CODA, Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and other agencies and organizations that are really helping us to identify participants. We're going to keep those engagements going, those conversations going, and hoping that they can help us keep this sustainable moving forward.
Hi, Carmen. So obviously, this is a little bit more Columbus focused, so I apologize for that. But Columbus as a city recently has been very progressive with different ideas of transportation, downtown, things of that nature. We've unfortunately had companies like Smart Car come and go, and there's other ideas and things coming in. What is kind of the plan to work those into this? Are they already under this Smart Columbus umbrella, or is it they're just kind of offshoots that hopefully collaborate nicely with us all, or is that kind of something where you're competing against their infrastructure already there?
So I guess the question is, how are other mobility providers that are coming to Columbus, how are we going to work with them building that transportation ecosystem? Is that correct? Okay, so that's a great question. And the first, I guess my response is, for the multimodal trip planning application and common payment system project, that's where we're building that complete transportation ecosystem. Columbus only has Central Ohio Transit Authority. We only have one transit agency, and we are all bus based. So there's no light rail systems, nothing along those lines in Columbus. So we really rely upon other mobility providers from the private sector to help us in filling in those transportation gaps. And so with this, the mayor's office has taken a step, and this program really was instrumental in that happening, is any new mobility provider that is coming to Columbus has to be a part of this. And so you have to be a part of this trip planning application and common payment system. So the scooters, I'm sure scooters are the rage in all cities. There's Bird and Lime here in Columbus. We have more scooter companies coming in. All of them are required to be a part of this. We have more bike share companies coming. They're all required. We have car share companies that will be coming this year. They are required. Anything that's under the city's control, as part of that permitting process, we are building that ecosystem. The exception to that is the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. In Ohio, they're regulated by the state. And so we lack control there. So we are working with them to try to get them a part of the system and show them and tell them what the benefits are to be a part of this.
And the one thing that I'll add to that comment is the thing that I've been most impressed about in working with Andy and the rest of the Smart Columbus group is they're always thinking about not how is this only going to affect Columbus, but we have to demonstrate at the end how this can affect other cities throughout the the focuses throughout the United States. I also look at it from the standpoint of I hear of a number of things that are going on in Europe, and most recently I hear about what's going on in Toronto around smart cities. So I hope to see that there's that dialogue back and forth, so that this doesn't just end up being a smart Columbus, but this really it does end up being a smart cities, and that there's things that can be applied to other locations. All right, thank you very much. Oh yeah, go ahead, Mark, I'll repeat it.
Along with this, is there plans to incorporate like a 5G plan into this as well?
So the question is, are there plans to incorporate 5G technologies into this in terms of network bandwidth? I have no idea.
Yeah, so I know a little bit. I know that there's discussions in the city regarding that with providers. I don't know the details of that, but I know those discussions are ongoing.
Well, the reason I ask is because that there's supposedly a much better GPS link with the 5G, and I know right now Sacramento is supposed to be the first fully 5G city in the United States, but I wasn't sure if this grant included that or not.
It does not. I believe you're right, Sacramento. I've also heard some stories. I want to say there's a city in Texas that was going to try and do it also, but Google was setting it up, and I think Google actually backed out of it because they were having issues. So I think there's still lots of work to be done in this area, but those discussions are ongoing.
Yeah, there's a question, I think I see.
Just out of curiosity, for the automated vehicles, how are you guys going to help make sure that these child or these babies are secured safely since they'll be on the roads? Like, is there going to be a expectation for car seats for these lower income families that probably don't use car seats, or?
So for the automated vehicle project, obviously safety is priority number one. And so acknowledging the limits of the technology as exists today, we're running all these on low-speed residential roadways. So we're staying out of traffic, essentially, to minimize any type of chances we have with vulnerable road users, other vehicles, et cetera. But as part of this, there wouldn't be any car seats. The mother would be able to hold the child just like you would on a regular bus, regular COTA bus or any other transit bus.
I think the question also was referring to Courtney's project as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that project too. Okay, so the prenatal trip assistance project. Yes, that was one of the significant needs that we identified with our stakeholder engagement was car seats. And so we, as part of that project, we had just got under contract Kaizen Health. Kaizen Health is based out of Chicago. They do projects all over, well, they have their business all over the country. Kaizen Health, some of their mobility providers do provide car seats for mothers. And so with that project, you'll have an application, you'll have a web portal, but you also have a call center, just like you do today. So we want to ensure we've at least provided the same functionality that currently exists with the NEMT system. We're hoping that more people will use the app and web portal to see how technology advances their NEMT system. But with that, you could then select my needs, and one of those needs could be a car seat from your app or web portal and so forth. And so we can provide that transportation.
Great question.
Is there a question? I'm not sure.
Going off of her question, would these have wheelchair accessibility with tie downs?
For the prenatal trip assistance project?
The original question, the smart cars.
The self-driving vehicles.
Yeah.
Yes, self-driving vehicles. So no, they don't have the tie downs. They do have ramps, so you can access if you do have a wheelchair. So one of the things is in this arena of self-driving vehicles, especially shuttles, Many of these are built outside the United States, and so they do not meet federal motor vehicle safety standards, and so you have to get exemptions for those vehicles, and they have been getting those exemptions to operate in the United States. So they are working on the ability for those tie downs, strap downs, but this vehicle will not have it at this time, and that's something that the industry in general is working towards.
And I'll add, so I've been heavily involved in the wheelchair tie-down and transportation side for many years, and there's always been this ongoing discussion of when do you need them and when don't you need them, especially in fixed bus routes, and where can we look at innovation so that you don't always need them in place to make it easier for people to get from point A to point B. And I think this is just going to further that discussion, and there's going to have to continue to be discussion around what does that look like, and how does that impact safety overall? Okay. Thank you very much. I know you stayed a little bit later. I think